Okay, let's see here. That started, and now I'll share the screen. Camera. Present. All right, guys. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. We're going to talk about the macroeconomic outlook for 2024, subtitled How to Maximize Your Fortress. That's the common theme of what we work on. And thank you guys for joining us. And we'll get started today with our main objectives today. What are we going to expect from interest rate environment in 2024? What do we think the macro factors that are pulling us back towards ZERP? And also a very brief overview of what to expect by asset class. We'll cover that very briefly at the end. And I also am thrilled to be joined with Dylan Clark, portfolio manager and hedge fund expert. Will also be joining us with some information regarding some of the things he's seeing in the marketplace as well. And so before we get started, we'll go ahead and skip that slide and talk about supply shocks. And that's our first big picture theme, is to talk about supply shocks and macro and how that's played out. So essentially what the Fed has been battling over the past 2 years, 3 years, is essentially interruption from COVID and Ukraine. So essentially those are the two big trends that have worked their way, and we really have seen how that's affected everything. And so we're going to talk about supply shocks. And so a supply shock is just overall a sudden unexpected supply chain issue. And again, we saw ships parked off the coast of LA back to back to back. And so essentially that's what the supply shocks are. And again, guys, I'll have this slide share. The slides will be available after the presentation here, so don't worry about trying to take in all the information. This is a very deep dive, and so I'll have the slides available after the presentation as well. So we're not going to go deep into the definitions and whatnot here, but just to know that it is in the slides for you there. So what we were kind of thinking about in terms of the big picture here is maybe the questions are more important than the answer in what we're looking at in terms of our viewpoint. And so we're kind of coming down on this, and again, it's open for interpretation. Macroeconomics is part of what's fun about it is there's a ton of different ways of looking at it, but we think that tame transitory maybe turned out to be more right than not. And so we go to this slide here. This is really the big picture of why things are really looking we're pretty bullish on the next year. We've got headline PCE and core PCE, and basically every single measure of inflation really plummeting, and why we think the Fed's starting to get more comfortable about where they were at, and why they look like they're ready to not only halt, but when we look at what's going to happen interest rate wise and why we're really excited, we think that things are going to really turn out well this year in terms of interest rates. Also, another thing that's really fascinating, ordinarily in macroeconomics, when you hike interest rates to the extent that they did, you would expect a huge unemployment thing to happen in correlation with such a huge interest rate hike. And this is the beautiful thing that's starting to really take hold, is that unemployment just never showed up with the interest rate hike. And so we're kind of in this Goldilocks zone of rate hikes and unemployment being non-correlated, and that's usually not what you would expect in that circumstance. So that's another weird indication. This time was definitely strange, and that's probably my big things you always hear. This time is different, and you never want to say that, but I would say this time is weird. Has always been kind of my theme about this. And then talk a little bit about the Fed dot plot, just to share a little bit about what that shows the Fed is thinking. And so essentially the dot plot has shown definitely at least a 75 point drop in 2023. 2024, they're showing going from from where they're at now to a drop of at least 100 basis points, and then into 2025. And we're going to get to this anyway. We expect this number to be well below this, and we'll show why we think that. And Dylan definitely confirmed our opinion on this, and we'll definitely talk to Dylan here in a minute about that. But this is where we really get a lot of our kind of an interesting take is the CME FedWatch tool, which is always an interesting take on things. And so, if you ever really want to know what the interest rate derivatives are saying versus what the Fed is talking about, we really like what the CME tool offers in terms of insight. So here's the 2020, the March 24 meeting, which is, I think, we're expecting a good chance of that first cut in the March meeting from based on the probabilities, and then we move that forward, and you can see as the year transpires in 2024 per the CME FedWatch tool, we're starting to see really like serious chances of drops. And this is 50 basis points by June. And then, of course, we play the tape all the way out. And you can see here that the CME tool is predicting anywhere from a full, point and a half, point and a quarter, all the way down even lower than that. So it's really fascinating to show with the CME tool. And Dylan, we had a conversation, just before today about you are seeing maybe even as much as a full 7 cuts. And what are you seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, the market right now, they're forward pricing in 7 cuts actually in 2024 total, which I just don't see a scenario where that happens. There's only 8 Fed meetings in a year. One is in January. There's a 15% chance of a cut in January. So that means they're gonna have to cut rates every single meeting out. There's no way. There's no reason for them to do it. It's not logical. It's not plausible. The Fed's articulating 3. I'm leaning towards maybe 3. I don't even think they need to move them. I think we're doing just fine where we're at. I think things are suffering the way that they need to and should have and should be, and they're fine where they're at. Now it causes a real interesting dynamic across the board as far as total investments, but I mean, a long-term historical average, we're not in a unfamiliar territory. If anything, we're normal right now. So
well, and that is interesting, and that's kind of why we are thinking it supply shock is abated. And here's to that point, what you said, Dylan, was really right. I mean, you look historically overall, look at how low even historically, even back to the 80s, even we're still super low compared to even the 80s. So it's an interesting point, and so Dylan, any other interesting things in the real estate market that you've seen? You've got access to some cool insights these days, and just curious, anything else you're seeing news wise?
Yeah, real estate office wise is getting a lot more interesting. I took a personal short position against the BlackRock Mortgage Trust yesterday, and then I filled out the rest of my position today. They have at least 36% of CLOs are in office spaces. The rest of it's mostly mixed use with some multifamily in there. Mixed use is really just a fancy classification for office. And it's an interesting thing. I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds on how the CLOs work and how all of this has happened. But essentially what it comes down to is you have 3 classes of people right now. You have Class C, who once they go through their 3 years with their 1-1 extension, so a total of 5, they can refinance out and they can pay and meet their interest rate and debt obligation of, say, call it 8.5%. And you have Group B, who can really only cover SOFR, which is Fed funds rate. So I think that's sitting at like 5.3 today, but they can't cover that extra spread. And then you have Group A, who is a lot of people I'm connected with on LinkedIn who are going to go pop.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of the situation. So Blackstone holds a lot of those mortgages, so I'm sitting short them, and I won't go into a whole deep dive because we can sit here and talk for
Yeah,
hours about why.
for sure.
Um,
But
but
Dylan, would you say primarily multifamily is the largest exposure and less so in the other asset classes?
no, I'd say offices.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
I'd say it's a lot more, yeah, because people can work from home, right? You don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need an office. People are going to pay their rent before they necessarily pay anything else. So I don't think multifamilies in danger yet. I think in regions it is. I think based
Mm.
on your sponsor, it's you should be very worried.
Yeah.
Um, I know of some personally that I don't know how anyone's surviving. They're probably going to default, and you probably won't hear from them for a while. But
Mm.
um, it's gonna be your smaller people who got into the game and ramped up in 2019, 2020, 2021. Those are going to be the people who are
Yeah.
going to crash out. They're going to crash and burn. People are going to lose a lot of money.
Piled on the bridge of debt, and again, it's it was perfectly reasonable at the time to do that, and I think that's part of the kind of flip side. It's not wasn't a crazy idea. It just didn't work out right. That there was that, and as we can see here, back in 2018, 2019, the interest rate environment was very very favorable, and now it's most decidedly not. And then so it's interesting also to me that there's kind of a race between, okay, if I can just hang on to the end of 24, do I have a shot of serious rate cuts? And again, I think Dylan and I are different camps on this, but that's okay. I think um, it's going to be interesting for to be sure how that plays out.
Yep, I agree, and it doesn't help that a lot of people who are owning these aren't asset managers. They're not
Mm.
investors. They could
Yeah.
go ask your sponsor what SOFR is. I'd be
Yeah.
surprised if half of them could tell you what
it,
it is.
it's shocking. It's shocking how few actually know how that aspect of it. And I agree. It is what it is, and not everyone is destined to be a fund manager. That's for sure. All right. Well, I did want to talk about. Well, let's see here. So, I'm curious about this one. Return of the Mac. If you guys remember that song, I think ZERP is lurking around the corner myself, and this is where Dylan and I are probably very different in terms of our analysis. But and the reason why I think we're looking at a return to that. So if we think that the supply chain has worked its way out, then we're going back to pre-COVID, and so these factors of slowdown in trend growth, aging global population, a global savings glut, declining investment in technology. That was another one here that seemed to be really common in terms of the explanation. I personally believe that these factors are going to are part of the gravity pulling that interest rate down. And as you saw, if we're returning back to what we were before COVID, essentially, I think we're returning back to that, and that's why I think the macro factors point to that personally. Um, and just to give you guys, if you really want to geek out, there's the R star, which is the natural rate of unemployment. Or natural rate of interest. I'm not gonna get into that too much here, but that is in the slides. If you want to read the papers, I did include them here. Um, but want to talk a little bit about the actual asset classes and turn now to the asset classes and kind of double back to what we're talking about with apartments. Another thing that's interesting too is the vacancy rate still looking okay historically. A ton of construction coming online. And that's another interesting part about the multifamily space. There's a ton of construction, and so for the folks that are battling to save their deals, that's another competitive factor. That's another headwind for them. And then turning to office, we'll return back to the office space thing. It's interesting how, and these are, by the way, I got to give a ton of credit to Marcus and Milchat for this section of the slides. This was a really great point they made, is that the suburban office is doing way better than the older urban office, and there's a huge disparity in vacancy rates by asset class there, and by age and location. And then And then retail. Retail is just really doing outstanding right now. Very, very low vacancy rates, and we're really bullish on retail ourselves as well. So retail overall is doing very well. Now, again, of course, you have the Class C and rougher neighborhoods. That those are more. They're definitely struggling more. But retail definitely still doing really great overall. And then also just an interesting point versus industrial. It's very interesting in industrial that about half of the top 10 metros accounted for half of the growth. And I thought that was a stunning factor that they mentioned in terms of industrial. So that's another thing to look at in terms of industrial if you're looking at that spot. How is that particular market doing versus the rest of the 10 metros? And then this is the link. I have the link to the actual presentation here. I definitely recommend the Marcus and Millichap on that presentation. They're really helpful on that. And then overall, guys, we're just here to help. If you have any questions about the presentation or want to talk about how it can help, give us a shout. And I guess we now stand open for questions and comments, guys. Any discussion? Sean, you're great located in the Texas markets and seeing all kinds of interesting things in the multifamily. How do you think the market's doing overall?
Just from a Texas standpoint, I mean, and just to give anybody that listens to this later some context, we invest predominantly in the mid-cities area between Dallas and Fort Worth. So we're very narrowly focused. We love that market because it's growing. It has great schools. There's tons of employment around. And I'm sure everybody, sees the stats. I just read the latest U-Haul index where Texas is still #1 for people moving here. I believe it's the third year in a row. So those are all things that are, speak toward the good side of everything. Costs have been going up. Taxes and insurance are the two primary drivers, with payroll being a very close third. And so people that aren't doing their homework, some of the people that you and Dylan talked about, the newbies that got started in the last 2 or 3 years, that really didn't plan for, oh crap, there's something I didn't plan on. You know me, and we've had these discussions. I like to have what I refer to as my oh crap fund. So when the property manager calls me and you go, oh crap, you reach into your oh crap fund, you throw some money at it, you turn what would have been a major headache into an annoyance.
Yeah.
And anyway, to get around to answering your question, overall, I'm still bullish on real estate in general and multifamily specifically. I'm also bullish on oil and gas. And and if you've got any Tesla owners out there that listen to this, I'm all for electric vehicles and alternate energy sources. But the reality today is that I saw a stat somewhere. I don't have any data to back this up, but I believe it takes about 284 barrels of oil equivalent energy to create 1 Tesla battery. I really want to track down some hard data on that. But
yeah, and Sean, I couldn't agree more. And I think also this is why I'm very bullish on nuclear. With the new technologies in nuclear, I think any transition to clean tech is going to require some other answer, and I think nuclear is it's the obvious answer. People who lived through the 70s may not like that, but for sure it's a very very interesting problem, because I think you're right that to even get to the clean transition is really tough, and I'm very interested in that. Dylan, you have something on that?
Yeah, just regarding the clean transition part, it's impossible. We don't have the infrastructure for it. I ran these numbers because we're looking at making an energy play up in Canada,
Mm.
and trucking alone. So trucking it takes like 2.4 gigawatts. There's 3 batteries on there. 2.4 gigawatts. They just got done. I can't remember. I think it was in Quebec or Ontario. They just got done building a dam that took 15 years and billions upon billions of dollars, and it produces 1.1 gigawatts.
Great Scott, 1.21 gigawatts. Okay, for guys who
So
are
we ran the math, and point being, you would have to dam an area from Nova Scotia to Newfoundland
damn
to
it,
create enough power.
Maybe we can just dam Washington and
damn it,
and
damn
that'll,
Washington.
But that's the insanity. You would have to dam an area that large,
Yeah.
which is hundreds of miles, by the way,
Yeah.
just to
yeah.
produce enough energy for trucking. That's not
Mhm.
even consumer. So it's not possible with our current infrastructure. It's the same
Mhm.
infrastructure that we built when we
Yeah.
did all of our levee towns and interstate expansion in the 50s and
Mhm.
60s. We
Mhm.
just can't support it. So
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
feasible.
it's
I
a
would
sober.
go.
It's sobering, isn't it, Dylan? It's like I care very much about the environment too. I'm a Colorado hippie guy at heart in ways. A farm kid at maybe is the alternative explanation. But as much as I want it to be clean tech, it's just not feasible with the current reality, and I think that's the sobering part about it.
Yeah, if I had to go long anything equity based for clean alternative, it'd be anything hybrid.
Mm,
Whoever's doing the most in the
yeah,
hybrid space,
mm,
100%, that's who I'd be tackling.
yeah.
Allocate a small portion to your wind, solar, your Tesla people and whatnot. But
Yeah. Well, and we can all agree that the Cybertruck is just plain ugly anyway, while we're at it.
but yeah, it's just not feasible. And keep in mind, Canada only has 40 million people. Like it's not happening.
Yeah. Yep. Addie, I had some interesting questions in the comments there. I want to get to the comment section. It was really interesting stuff going on down there. And I don't know if Addie can join us or not, but had some great questions about oversupply of multifamily. Have we seen any indication, Sean? Especially you're probably the most familiar with that. Are you seeing any signs of oversupply given what we're looking at, or I have my own comments, but I'd love to hear what you have to say first.
So from a Texas standpoint in general, no. And the reason being is, like I said earlier, Texas is #1 on the U-Haul index for people moving into it.
Mm-hmm.
There's about 1,000 people a day moving into Texas. That is several very large apartment complexes. And I guarantee you,
Yeah.
we are not delivering several large apartment complexes on a daily
Every day.
basis
That's
across
for
the state.
sure. Yeah. Well,
DFW gets about 400 of those, which is probably, 2 good sized apartment complexes a day.
mm-hmm. Well, and not only that, we were behind the curve, and to give everyone a background that I think is still a problem. We haven't solved it. I think we never caught up. Back in 2010, 2007 to 2010, we had all these developers that got crushed in the last crisis, and so essentially I don't know. I see data anywhere from 1 million to 6 million units behind housing. We've got a severe housing shortage to begin with, and then you add that on with Sean with the moving in places like Texas. I just don't see that problem abating anytime soon. So personally, I don't see overbuilding in multifamily being an issue, and definitely we like build to rent, for example. We really like build to rent as an example, and part of why we like it so much. So the supply for the last from 2010 was just it never came back online, and we never caught up, and we're just not remotely close. In my opinion, we're not remotely close yet. So I just think that's just not a non-factor for the most part.
Yeah,
Wow, and yeah, Addie said Canada about 3.5 million short. Yeah, crazy. And Sean, you had a point.
No, I was just going to say that the whole just the I think right now everything is pretty well balanced out, just from an economic standpoint in Texas. I think even though they're doing a lot of building and they're going to be delivering units, especially in certain key areas. I mean, Collin County is growing like wildfire. If you do your emerging market analysis, Collin County is going to pop up to probably the top, at least the top 3 or 4 counties in the country. And I know a guy that he actually teaches the CCIM's emerging market class.
Ooh.
And yeah, he's like really, really good at emerging market analysis. And he called Collin County about a year and a half ago.
Wow.
I wished I'd listened to him.
Well, and to kind of plug and kind of circle back on our earlier commentary, the problems in multifamily are almost all balance sheet related. It's, the distress is all balance sheet. The fundamentals, and that's kind of what's kind of an interesting opportunity about it is if you got dry powder, I think a multifamily is a decent play in the next 2 to 3 years because almost all the distress is balance sheet related and not fundamental related at all.
Doug, I'll make one exception to that. The one exception being those that poorly conceived in underwriting property taxes and insurance cost increases. And, the misperception of evictions, and this is a regional, city by city matter. You can't really paint a wide swath across the entire country. But I talk to syndicators that are still to this day trying to get evicting people, and they're still having problems.
Man. Yeah, and that's a fair point, Andy. If you can't prosecute, if the eviction laws aren't supportive in your jurisdiction, then it's a hard to justify it, I think, and that's another great counterpoint. We really, we like Texas for that reason. Generally, Texas is very good. I think Houston might be a bit of an exception. There are parts of Houston, maybe in parts of Austin, that aren't as favorable, just because the dockets are less favorable, and that's a jurisdiction by jurisdiction issue. But for sure, I think that's a great point too, Andy. Is just don't make any sweeping comments on anywhere in terms of eviction. Make sure your landlord tenant laws are friendly while you're at it.
I think Houston's an interesting place. I'm currently apartment hunting because I'm moving out of this one. And
for the record, he wasn't evicted, everyone. He wasn't evicted.
Funny, I'll tell you after. I'll just never mind. It's recording. So I'm apartment hunting. There's so much supply of apartments here in Houston. Like it's insane. You go look at a map of apartments, it's just bubbles everywhere. You can't even see the city anymore. And every apartment complex has multiple units available for rent. I mean, everything from your $1,100 one bedroom all the way up through your $3,000 two bedroom. I mean, I'd almost say vacancy rates here are starting to climb more and more because it seems like there's more available than there was a few months ago.
Yeah,
hey,
and that would make sense.
I need you to move into this deal in Prairie View, Texas.
It's a bit of a commute, but other than that, it'll be okay.
It's worth it. I need more occupancy.
We're looking at where not a chance.
Yeah, it's too north. It'll still be a bad commute. So
I'm probably moving over to Cinco, by the way.
Yeah, that's still probably a bad commute for you. So this is being recorded, or?
Yeah. Let me take off the recording, guys. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We're going to stop the recording and talk offline here.